Welcome to Heartbreak Chronicles. All Griffin Reed could do was sit there and watch his world crumble before his eyes. The sun shone in through the window, reflecting the flashing letters on the document the lawyer had handed him. DNA test results. The numbers and percentages may be difficult for the average person to comprehend, but the conclusion part is breathtakingly clear. He is not related to the 8-year-old twins he holds so dear. "Are you sure this isn't some kind of mistake?" Griffin asked, his voice sounding strange even to his own ears. His brother Malcolm sneered, loosened his valuable tie, and sat comfortably on Griffin and Adrienne's living room couch as if it had never been his place. "There are no mistakes, brother. Your wife promised me a crazy night, but that night turned into many nights," Malcolm said, nonchalantly opening his briefcase and pulling out a thick file. "Here's the DNA report. Those 2 kids of yours are actually mine. You're just their real uncle." Griffin shook his head, his mind reeling. This had to be a bad joke, or a nightmare, and he would wake up soon, and Adrienne would be lying next to him, and their life would be as it always was. But that smug look on Malcolm's face told him it was all true. Just then, Adrienne came down the stairs, wearing a turquoise blue bikini bathing suit, as if she was ready to enjoy the sun in the backyard pool. She paused for a moment at the sight of the scene in the living room, but a confident smile quickly returned to her face. "He's right, Griffin." Adrienne walked straight to Malcolm and stood beside him. "I've been lying to you for years for your money." Griffin looked at her incredulously. "What the hell is going on? We've been married for 10 years. Malcolm's lawyer, a tall, thin man, handed Griffin a document. "Here's the eviction notice. Get out of our house, Griffin," Adrienne said coldly before pulling Malcolm's hand towards the master bedroom. Griffin was struck by lightning and could only watch as his wife and brother disappeared at the top of the stairs. He picked up the eviction notice, his hands trembling. The paper stated that the house was entirely in Adrienne's name, even though they had been paying the mortgage together since their marriage. How is that possible? 10 years of marriage, 2 children he loves, a brother he trusts, all an elaborate hoax? When Griffin first held the twins 8 years ago, his world changed completely. In that moment, he vowed to be a good father, much better than his own. He and Adrienne, who was just settling in Montreal at the time, accepted a position as telecommunications infrastructure specialist, responsible for installing and maintaining communications equipment in remote areas throughout Quebec. Their lives seem perfect. Griffin has a stable and well-paying job that requires frequent short-term travel, but he always makes time for his family whenever possible. Adrienne, on the other hand, is a real estate agent who has become more and more successful as her network continues to grow. Twins Owen and Caleb are the center of their lives. Griffin cherishes every moment she spends with her children, from teaching them to ride bikes to tutoring them in their math homework. He'd never questioned their blood relationship, despite the occasional comment that the twins were more like their mother. Griffin always responds proudly that Adrienne's genes are stronger. He never thought about the hidden truth behind those comments. Griffin and Malcolm haven't been close since they were kids. As the older of the 2 brothers, Malcolm always seemed to be one step ahead of Griffin. Better grades, better college, and eventually a successful corporate lawyer. Their father never hid his favoritism for Malcolm, while Griffin was seen as the loser in the family. When Malcolm moved to Montreal 3 years ago to open his own law firm, Griffin tried to rebuild their brotherly relationship. He invites Malcolm to a family dinner and offers to help him adjust to his new city. These efforts seemed to work, and Malcolm began to frequent their lives, becoming the twins' cool uncle, always bringing expensive gifts and exciting stories of his adventures. Griffin never suspected that Malcolm's sudden closeness might have another motive. However, in retrospect, there were many signs he should have noticed. Adrienne began to pay more attention to her appearance, signing up for fitness classes and buying expensive clothing. She explains this is to maintain a professional image in a competitive real estate market. She started attending more client meetings and real estate seminars, sometimes staying out all night. Griffin also notices a change in her attitude toward Malcolm. Initially, she seems to have reservations about Griffin's brother, believing him to be arrogant and pompous. Gradually, however, she begins to laugh in response to Malcolm's jokes, sits next to him at family gatherings, and even defends him when Griffin complains about Malcolm's self-centered behavior. "You're being too hard on Malcolm," Adrienne had said. He's just trying to fit in. You should be happy that he finally wants to be part of the family. Now Griffin realizes that Malcolm doesn't just want to be part of the family. He wants to take the whole family away. Griffin is a careful observer. His job as a telecommunications infrastructure specialist requires him to recognize even the smallest problems in the system. Over time, he began to notice some unusual signs in his family. The first signs appeared on an ordinary Tuesday night. Griffin finishes his work upstate early and decides to surprise Adrienne by coming home a day early. He bought her favorite wine and cheese and wanted to prepare a romantic dinner for her. When he opened the door to his house, it was surprisingly quiet. The twins were supposed to be at after-school field hockey practice, but Adrienne's car was in the driveway. "Adrienne," he shouted, setting the groceries on the kitchen counter. There was no response, but he heard movement upstairs. Griffin walked up the stairs and heard the sound of water coming from the master bathroom. He smiled, imagining a surprise for his bathing wife. But when he walked into the bedroom, he noticed something strange. The bed was a messy comforter. Both pillows were dented, and there were 2 empty wine glasses on the nightstand. The bathroom door opens and Adrienne steps out, wrapped in a towel, and gasps in surprise at the sight of Griffin. "God, you scared me," she said, pressing one hand to her chest. "Aren't you supposed to be back tomorrow?" "I wanted to surprise you," Griffin replied, gesturing to the glasses. "Any guests?" Adrienne's eyes twinkled for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. "Oh, Bethany came over for a drink to discuss a potential high-end real estate listing. She just left." Griffin nodded, though an uneasy feeling began to creep into the pit of his stomach. Bethany is Adrienne's co-worker and BFF, an explanation that makes sense. But somehow it didn't feel right. "You should have called ahead," Adrienne said, walking toward her closet. "I could have prepared dinner." "I wanted to surprise you," he repeated, noting a red mark on her neck that only became visible when she turned around. That night, Griffin said nothing, but began to pay more attention. He noticed that Adrienne's cell phone was always face down, and she started taking calls in the other room, saying it was a sensitive client issue. Her activity on social media has decreased, but Griffin has noticed that she often receives notifications without responding to them on public platforms. Even more worrisome is the twins' growing attachment to Malcolm. They start mentioning secret adventures with Uncle Malcolm, of which Griffin knows nothing. When he asks, Adrienne explains that Malcolm sometimes does her a favor by picking up the kids from school while she's busy working. "You should be thanking him, not questioning him," she said. "I need all the help I can get since you've started having more work up north." Griffin felt guilty and ashamed of his skepticism. He does work a lot more these days and appreciates having someone to help with the kids. However, that sense of unease lingers. The decisive clue came from an unexpected discovery. Griffin was organizing his closet when he found a note in the pocket of a jacket Adrienne almost never wears. It was scrawled, "See you tonight and tomorrow. Your secret is still safe," and signed with a simple M. Griffin stared at that letter for a long time. M may stand for a lot of people, but deep down, he knows it's Malcolm. The evidence fits together like a jigsaw puzzle, piece by piece. Griffin never thought he'd be investigating his wife, but now he has no choice. He is not a workaholic, but he does have to travel a lot, which gives Adrienne and Malcolm plenty of time to carry out their betrayal. Griffin began documenting what Adrienne called client meetings and real estate activities. He called her office and asked if she was there, with the excuse that he wanted to have lunch with her. Multiple times, her coworkers told him she was out of the office and she told Griffin she was working. Evidence continues to accumulate. Griffin notices that Adrienne has changed her password habits. Although her cell phone has always been password protected, she has now set a new password and no longer uses it in front of Griffin. She purchased a new cell phone, which she claimed was exclusively for work, but never left it behind. One day, after dropping the twins off at school, Griffin finds himself driving past Malcolm's apartment building. Without any premeditation, he turned into the parking lot and was surprised to see the Adrienne's car parked there. It's 9 a.m. She should be in her office. Griffin stops the car and considers his options. He could have rushed in and caught them red-handed. But what would that have entailed? How will the twins be affected? He needed more evidence than just his suspicions. Griffin started doing more research. He went through their financial records and found something disturbing. Although he had always assumed that their house was in joint names, in reality, Only Adrienne's name was on the real estate license. About 3 years ago, which is when Malcolm moved to Montreal, Adrienne suggested that the property be transferred to her name, claiming it was for tax reasons. Griffin agreed without hesitation, trusting his wife. Now he realizes this may be part of a larger plan. While reviewing his bank statement, Griffin discovers more secrets. Adrienne had a separate account that he didn't know about. Each month, a sizable amount is transferred from their joint account to that account. When asked, Adrienne explained that it was saving for the twins' college education. But that money was far more than the amount they had planned to save for their child. The most heartbreaking evidence comes from the twins themselves. During a dinner conversation, Owen inadvertently mentions Dad's apartment. The kid looks confused when Griffin asks who he's talking about. Malcolm's dad's apartment, he said, then instantly alerted when he saw the look on Griffin's face. I mean Uncle Malcolm. Caleb quickly interjects and starts talking about the school program, but the damage has already been done. Griffin's heart sank, but he acted as if nothing had happened, not wanting to upset the children. That night, Griffin lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, Adrienne pretending to be asleep beside him as he made his decision. He needed to know the truth, no matter how painful. The next day, he contacted a private investigative firm and requested surveillance on Adrienne and Malcolm. He also contacted a DNA testing company, claiming it was for family health history research, and asked to be tested for his relationship to the twins. A few weeks later, the truth is revealed, and it's harsher than Griffin could have imagined. Investigators provided photos of Adrienne and Malcolm in intimate behavior dating back at least 2 years. DNA testing confirmed Griffin's greatest fear, that he was not related to his twin. Armed with this information, Griffin contacted a law firm to inquire about his rights. The situation is not encouraging. Since the house is in Adrienne's name, and since he is not related to the twins by blood, his position is weak. He needs a plan. Before he was able to take action, however, Malcolm and his attorney showed up at the door, holding DNA test results and an eviction notice. They knew Griffin was investigating and decided to preemptively attack. Being kicked out of your own home is a surreal experience. Griffin stood on the sidewalk, a hastily filled backpack in his hand, looking at the front door that once represented home and safety. His entire life collapsed in an instant. Like a decade of memories and emotional connections had been maliciously erased. The most painful part is not seeing the twins. They were sent to Adrienne's parents' house, away from the chaos. Griffin can't imagine what they'll be told when they return. Will they think he's abandoned them? Will they be told the truth? Or will some story be made up to make him look like a monster? He sat in the car, his body numb and his thoughts reeling. He drove through the city and eventually came to a mid-range hotel. While booking a room with a credit card, it occurred to Griffin that Adrienne might try to access their joint account. He immediately called his bank, transferred his funds to a new personal account, and froze the joint account. This is just the first step. For the next few days, Griffin could barely function. He called in sick and told his boss he had a family emergency. His boss, Vincent, was understanding and gave him the time he needed. Griffin spent days in his hotel room trying to make sense of what was happening. The pain, anger, and sense of betrayal swept over him in waves that at times almost took his breath away. Especially painful is the issue of twins. Even though DNA tests showed they were not his biological children, in his mind, he was still their father. He raised them for 8 years and loved them more than his own life. How do you sever that connection all at once? On the 4th day, Griffin began to take action. He contacted a lawyer specializing in family law, Elise Duchamp, of Belgian descent. She's frank and stern, just what Griffin needs right now. It's not looking too good, Mr. Reed, Duchamp told him, sitting in her tidy office. Legally, you're at quite a disadvantage. The house is in her name. The kids aren't my biological kids, I understand that, Griffin said. But I paid most of the mortgage and I raised those kids for 8 years. That surely counts for something, doesn't it? It does count, she nodded. You contributed to the property and you can claim joint property during the marriage. As for the children, despite not being related by blood, you may be entitled to some form of custody or visitation because of your ongoing role as their father. But it's going to be an uphill battle. I'm ready to fight, Griffin said, determination shining in his eyes. They can't just take everything from me. Duchamp sighed. I must warn you that these types of cases can get very ugly. Your wife and brother seem to have detailed plans. Their actions show it was not an impulsive move. Griffin nods, and he realized it. In retrospect, the signs of this betrayal have been there for years. Adrienne and Malcolm have been playing a big game, while Griffin has been kept in the dark and continues to pay his bills like a fool, raising children that don't belong to him. Another thing, Griffin said, is that I want to know about the past. I need to know when and how this started. Revenge will not bring you peace, Mr. Reed, Duchamp warned. It's not about revenge, Griffin lied. It's about understanding. If I'm going to rebuild my life, I need to know what caused it to fall apart. Upon leaving the attorney's office, Griffin felt a new sense of determination. The sadness and shock are still there, but now there is a sense of purpose. He needs to fight for himself, for the children he still considers his own. But first, he needed to understand the full scope of the truth. Griffin started the car and drove to his next destination, the offices of Adrienne's real estate company. Bethany Lou used to be a co-worker and friend of Adrienne's, but the two fell out over a big deal a few months ago. Griffin hopes the rift is deep enough to make Bethany willing to share information. I'm not sure I should be talking to you about this, Bethany said nervously as she sat in the cafe, constantly checking the doorway, as if she was afraid Adrienne would suddenly appear. Please understand, Bethany, Griffin pleaded. My whole life is destroyed. I just want to know the truth. Bethany sighed, tapping her fingers against her coffee cup. I always thought something was off, but Adrienne never talked about the details. Since when? You know what? I'm not sure exactly when, but about 3 years ago, when your brother moved in, her behavior started to change. She became more ambitious. Griffin noted the care with which she chose her words. What do you mean? Bethany took a sip of her coffee and seemed to be organizing her thoughts. Adrienne has always been an ambitious person, which is why she's been so successful in real estate. But after that, she began to focus on the high-end market, working with luxury homes and luxury apartments. It requires a certain social status, and your brother seems to be able to help her gain access to those circles. Griffin frowns. So this is about status and money? Partly, but I think it's more than that. Bethany hesitated. Once, after we had a few drinks, she mentioned that your marriage had become predictable. She says she loves the twins, but misses the excitement. Typical excuse for infidelity, Griffin thought bitterly. But that doesn't explain Malcolm's involvement or this elaborate hoax. What did she say about Malcolm? Bethany shook her head, not directly. But she did mention the rivalry between your brothers. She said Malcolm was always trying to prove he was better than you in every way. It fits Malcolm's character. Ever since they were kids, Malcolm always had to win, no matter what the cost. If it means stealing Griffin's wife and family, it could be just another race for him. And another thing, Bethany added, her voice lowering. Last month, I overheard Adrienne and Malcolm talking about some sort of financial arrangement. They mentioned a trust fund and final plan. I didn't think much of it then, but now. Griffin felt a chill run down his spine. It wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment betrayal. It was an elaborate plot to take everything from him. About the twins, Griffin asked with difficulty, did she? She loved those kids, Griffin, Bethany said firmly. No matter what she did to you, and I never doubted that. This provided at least a glimmer of comfort, albeit a small one. After leaving the cafe, Griffin dialed another number. Vincent was his boss at the telecom company and a friend for many years. I needed to take a longer vacation, Griffin explained, and things at home. It's more complicated than I thought. What happened, man? Vincent asked, concern in his voice. You sound terrible. Griffin hesitates, then decides to come clean. Adrienne cheated on. And my brother. The twins are actually his children. They kicked me out of the house. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and then, Jesus, Griffin. I don't know what to say. It's okay, Griffin said, forcing himself to remain calm. I just need some time to process this and figure out the next steps. Sure, Vincent replied quickly. Take as long as you need. Is there anything I can do to help? Griffin was about to say no, but then a thought struck him. Actually, there is. Do you remember the security system we installed for that law group back east? Remember why? Malcolm has clients there. I'd like to know what cases he's been working on lately. The silence on the other end of the line told Griffin that Vincent understood what he was playing at. Griffin, Vincent finally said, I understand that you're in pain right now, but hacking into a law firm's system is illegal. I can't be a part of this. Griffin sighed. You're right, I'm sorry. I feel like I've been kept in the dark for too long. I understand, Vincent's voice softened, but you need to handle this through legal channels. Do you have a lawyer? There. But I need more information to understand what I'm fighting against. Look, Vincent said, I can't help you hack into any systems, but I know a couple of security guards who work in that area. Maybe they noticed something. Let me make some calls. Griffin gratefully accepted the offer. He needed as much information as possible to understand the scope of Adrienne and Malcolm's plans and why they had chosen to act now. The timing doesn't seem to be accidental. The truth is more disturbing than Griffin imagined. Through Vincent's security contacts, he learns that Malcolm has recently been working on a big case involving an energy company called ArcticFrontier. This company plans to develop large-scale energy projects in northern Quebec, right in the area covered by Griffin's telecommunications company. It can't be a coincidence, Griffin told Elise as they met again in her office, that I'm in charge of installing new communications infrastructure for that area. In fact, I've identified some problems in their environmental impact assessment. Elise nodded thoughtfully. So you think it has something to do with your work? It has to be relevant. Malcolm represented ArcticFrontier and could have exposed his clients to millions in fines and delays if I had reported the environmental problems I found. The pieces of the puzzle begin to fit together. Recently, Griffin found that ArcticFrontier omitted key data from its environmental impact statement, possibly on purpose. As part of installing the communications equipment, his team collected readings showing groundwater contamination that could be related to the company's early exploration. If this data becomes public, the program may be called off. So you think, Elise said slowly, that your brother and wife chose this time to reveal that you are not the biological father of the twins in order to prevent you from disclosing these environmental issues. Griffin nodded. I told Adrienne last week that I intended to report it to the regulators. The next day, Malcolm showed up on my doorstep with a lawyer. Elise narrowed her eyes. This goes beyond family law and into the realm of potential corporate crime. If your suspicions are correct, Malcolm may be using personal connections to protect his clients from legal liability. So what should I do? We need to proceed with caution, Elise warns. These are powerful people, and if they're willing to destroy your marriage and family to protect their interests, they could do much worse. Griffin felt anger burning in his chest. It's not just about personal betrayal anymore. It's about a conspiracy of greed and power. His wife and brother not only stole his family, they tried to stop him from doing the right thing. I need to gather more evidence, Griffin decided, not only about their infidelity, but about misconduct in this program. Elise nodded, but through legal channels. Don't risk doing anything that might jeopardize your standing in court. Griffin agreed, but a plan was already starting to form inside. Adrienne and Malcolm took everything from him: his marriage, his children, his home, even his dignity. He won't let them get away with it. After leaving the attorney's office, Griffin went directly to his workplace. He needs to recheck the environmental data his team collected to make sure everything is well documented. If ArcticFrontier and Malcolm are trying to cover up environmental violations, Griffin will make sure the truth comes out. But first, he needs to protect himself. If Malcolm is able to use DNA testing and legal maneuvers to destroy his family life, then Griffin must assume he will do whatever it takes. He needs to have the evidence copied and stored safely just in case. In his office, Griffin scrutinized all the environmental readings and reports. These data clearly show that ArcticFrontier's early exploration activities resulted in the leaching of hazardous chemicals into the groundwater. Even more troubling is the potential for these pollutants to affect nearby First Nations communities. Griffin creates a backup of the data, stores it in an encrypted cloud location, and sends a copy to a colleague he trusts. He then began to write a detailed report outlining his findings and concerns. This report will be sent to the appropriate regulators, but now is not the time. He needs to address his personal issues first to make sure he's equipped to deal with a possible backlash. That night, back in his hotel room, Griffin began organizing a more personal plan for revenge. He pulled out a notebook and began listing everything Adrienne and Malcolm had done and the weapons they planned to use against him. Then he began to think about how to turn these weapons on themselves. If they want to play games, Griffin said to himself. Then let us play. But we're going to play by my rules. Griffin meets the parents of the twins' classmates, Natalie, at the apartment door. Her son, Ryan, often plays with Owen and Caleb. Griffin, she called out, looking at him in surprise. I'm sorry to hear about you and Adrienne. Are you okay? Griffin felt a pang of heartache. Wait, what have you heard? Natalie looks uncomfortable. Oh, I thought you. Adrienne told the school you were separated and you moved out. She also implied that you had. Problem. Griffin took a deep breath and tried to control his anger. What kind of questions? She didn't specify, Natalie replied quickly. Just that you needed time and space to deal with a few things, and she needed to prioritize the safety of the children. Safe. Griffin's voice turned icy. She implied I was dangerous? Natalie's silence confirmed his suspicions. Not only is Adrienne stealing his family, she's damaging his reputation by portraying him as some sort of threat. In this moment, Griffin realizes that he's facing not just the breakup of his marriage, but a well-planned character assassination. Griffin, Natalie finally spoke. I don't believe the innuendo. I've seen you with the kids. No matter what happens, I know you love them. Griffin nodded gratefully, but his thoughts were already flying. If Adrienne is spreading rumors at school, she's probably doing it elsewhere. He needed to know her version of the story in order to defend himself. Seen the twins lately? He asked, trying to keep his voice steady. I saw them at school last week, Natalie replied. And they looked confused, Griffin. They asked Ryan where you'd been and why you hadn't come home. They miss you. Those words pierced his heart like a knife. His children couldn't understand why he suddenly disappeared from their lives. They probably think he abandoned them. Thank you for telling me this, Natalie, Griffin said, his voice choked. If you see them, can you tell them that I love them and that I'm trying to work things out? Natalie nodded, sympathy twinkling in her eyes. Of course. And, Griffin, if you need any help, let me know. Back at his makeshift apartment, Griffin begins to implement his plan. First, he needs to clarify the situation. He drafted an email to send to the children's teachers, his family, and close friends, briefly explaining that he and Adrienne were experiencing a separation, but that he remained concerned for the children's well-being and wanted to stay in touch. He worded it carefully, not mentioning Malcolm or any allegations that could raise legal issues. Next, he contacted the regulator associated with the ArcticFrontier case to set up a meeting. He won't let Malcolm and Adrienne stop him from doing the right thing. If they used their personal relationships to cover up corporate misconduct, the whole scheme may have been more extensive and corrupt than he first thought. Eventually, he began to gather evidence of his active role in the twins' lives. He organizes photos, videos, records of school activities, and other evidence of his involvement in the children's lives. He may not be their biological father, but he is the one who loves them and raised them. As insurance, Griffin also contacted a former colleague at Malcolm's law firm, Thomas Reeves. Thomas left because of ethical differences with Malcolm and may be willing to share useful information. I can't break attorney-client privilege, Thomas warned when we met at a quiet restaurant. But I can tell you public information and my own observations about Malcolm Mercer. I just want to understand what I'm fighting against, Griffin said. He and my wife took everything from me. I need to know how to protect myself. Thomas pondered for a moment, then spoke. It's no secret that Malcolm has always had an ambitious side. But in recent years, especially after taking on the ArcticFrontier case, he became, by any means necessary. There are rumors that he doesn't just work for clients. He has a personal financial interest in the project. Isn't that a conflict of interest? Griffin asked. If proven, and not only that, it could be a violation of attorney ethics, Thomas explains. But that's just hearsay. There's no proof. Griffin considered this information. Do you think he may have shared these potential financial gains with Adrienne? It's possible. The ArcticFrontier project is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. If Malcolm has an internal interest, it is vital for him to stop anything that might delay or terminate the program. Like the environmental problems I found, Griffin muttered. Thomas leaned forward. What did you find? Griffin briefly explained the contamination issues his team found in the project area. The look on Thomas's face told him that the information might be more explosive than he thought. Griffin, this isn't just a family issue or a business issue anymore, Thomas said seriously. If ArcticFrontier knew about these contamination issues and tried to cover them up, and if Malcolm was involved as their attorney, this could involve serious legal violations. Griffin nodded as a new resolve formed within him. Then I will fight not only for my family, but for the truth. Proceed with caution, Thomas warned. These people have money and power and are clearly not above protecting their interests at all costs. After leaving the restaurant, Griffin felt a strange calm. His plan is taking shape, to gather evidence, not only about Adrienne and Malcolm's betrayal, but about a larger conspiracy in which they may be involved. Then, at the right time, he will reveal everything. Over the next few weeks, Griffin fought on two fronts. One to secure legal rights for his relationship with the twins, and the other to gather evidence about the ArcticFrontier program and Malcolm's involvement. It was an exhausting struggle, but he was driven by a strong sense of justice. Through Elisa's help, Griffin filed a petition for temporary custody. Despite not being related by blood, the judge agreed to grant him limited visitation rights due to his long-standing role in the children's lives, pending a more permanent arrangement. The first visitation took place in a neutral, supervised setting, which humiliated Griffin, but he was willing to accept any offer that would allow him to see the twins. His heart almost stopped beating when Owen and Caleb ran into the room. They looked bigger than they did a couple weeks ago, even though that's impossible. Maybe it was because of this time apart, or because he saw them in a different light now. "Dad!" They cried out at the same time, flinging themselves into his arms. Griffin hugged them tightly, tears welling up in his eyes. No matter what the DNA says, these are his children. "Hey guys," he said softly, "I've missed you. Why don't you go home?" Caleb asked, his little face filled with confusion. "Mommy said you needed some time alone." "There are times when adults need some time apart to work things out," Griffin replied cautiously, not wanting to badmouth Adrienne in front of the kids, as tempting as that might be. "Is it because of Uncle Malcolm?" Owen asked suddenly, surprising Griffin. "He's at home a lot now, and Mom said he'd be staying with us." Griffin tried to control his expression. "How did you guys feel when Uncle Malcolm was there?" The twins exchanged a look before Caleb shrugged. "He bought us new consoles and lots of toys. But he doesn't play with us like you do. He's always on the phone or whispering to his mom." Griffin nodded, trying not to show his concern. "Well, we have 2 hours to play together today. What do you want to do?" They spent 2 precious hours playing board games, talking about school, and pretending everything was normal. Griffin avoids asking more questions about Adrienne or Malcolm, not wanting the kids to feel in the middle. But he made sure to tell them that no matter what happened, he loved them and would always be their father. When they parted, the twins clung to him, not wanting to leave. It almost broke him. "I'll see you next week, okay?" He promised. "I'll always be here." Watching them being taken away by social workers, Griffin felt a new sense of determination. His plan for revenge isn't just for himself anymore, it's for the children. He couldn't let them grow up in an environment built on lies and manipulation. If Malcolm and Adrienne were willing to betray him, they could have done the same thing to anyone. Kids need to know the truth, albeit in an age-appropriate way. After the visit, Griffin stepped up his efforts to investigate the ArcticFrontier program. Through his contacts in the telecom industry, he obtained additional data that confirmed his suspicions that the company's exploration activities had led to serious environmental pollution, far more than they had admitted in their official reports. More disturbingly, he found a pattern that suggests contamination data may be systematically underreported or deleted. This is not an accidental oversight. This looks like a deliberate cover-up. Griffin was careful to establish a chain of evidence, making sure everything was properly documented and verified. He couldn't risk Malcolm or ArcticFrontier accusing him of falsifying or exaggerating data. Meanwhile, Griffin is also investigating Adrienne and Malcolm's interactions over the past few years. Through social media profiles, credit card records, he still had access to their joint account history, and conversations with mutual friends. He began to piece together the timeline of their unfaithful relationship. Evidence suggests that their relationship did begin shortly after Malcolm moved to Montreal, but became more complicated. Evidence that funds were transferred from Malcolm to Adrienne's private account coincides with key milestones in the ArcticFrontier program. Griffin begins to suspect that his marriage may have broken up not just because of passion or desire, but because of an elaborate business plot. Both Adrienne and Malcolm may have benefited from his professional standing and knowledge of the program, while planning to eventually exclude him. This realization makes the betrayal all the more painful, but it also gives Griffin a strange kind of comfort. It's not just about his personal failings. It's about greed and manipulation. And those are the enemies he can fight. While Griffin seeks truth and justice, another drama is unfolding without his knowledge. Adrienne and Malcolm have begun to realize that their plans may be under threat. He still has visitation rights, Adrienne told Malcolm at one evening in the home they now share, concern in her voice. And that's not part of the plan. Malcolm waved a dismissive hand. That was only temporary. Once the judge sees that I'm the children's biological father, along with your ownership of the property, Griffin will be completely excluded. But what if he keeps digging into the Arctic Frontier thing? Malcolm frowned. He won't get the chance. Our plan is on track. His reputation is being tarnished and his finances are deteriorating. Soon he will be forced to accept a settlement and leave. Adrienne doesn't look so sure. You don't know Griffin. He's a fighter, especially for the kids. Those aren't his kids. Malcolm snapped, then realized what he'd said and softened his tone. I'm sorry. I mean, legally and biologically, he has no rights to them. Adrienne turned and faced the window. He raised them for 8 years. Where were you during those years, Malcolm? Malcolm's eyes narrowed dangerously. I thought we had already discussed this. We agree that this is the best arrangement. I provide the funds and support so that when the time is right, we can be reunited as a family. I know, Adrienne said softly, but the twins keep asking about Griffin. They miss him. They'll adapt, Malcolm said firmly. Kids always do. Besides, I bought them everything they wanted. I'm their father, and soon they'll fully accept that. Adrienne took a deep breath and decided to change the subject. How's the environmental report coming along? What happens if Griffin does report his findings to the authorities? Malcolm's expression turned somber. Our experts are ready to refute any claims he makes. Plus, his credibility will be questioned given his current situation and the fact that we were able to prove that he may have been motivated to sabotage the program. But what if the contamination is real? Malcolm looked at her coldly. Of course it's true. Do you think people in those remote areas really care? By the time the project is completed, Arctic Frontier will have made some token compensation and everyone will have forgotten about it. In the meantime, our investment will increase in value tenfold. Adrienne looked at her lover and for the first time felt a twinge of doubt. When they begin the relationship, everything seems so exciting. The forbidden romance, the thrill of secret meetings, Malcolm's promise of wealth and status. But now, watching him talk coldly about taking advantage of others and circumstances, she began to wonder what she had joined. Those are Aboriginal communities, Malcolm, she said softly, and real people can get hurt. It's business, Adrienne. He replied impatiently, and there are always sacrifices. But think about the payoff. Think of the life we could give the twins. Best school, best opportunity. Isn't that what you want? Adrienne didn't answer. Yes, she wants those things. But is she willing to acquire them in such a way? She had betrayed a man who loved her, a man who loved her children. How far has she come in this program? Adrienne's silence worries Malcolm. He needed her cooperation to ensure the success of his plan. If she faltered now, everything could fall apart. Look, he said, his voice softening. I know this is hard for you, but we've come this far. We can't go back. Soon, our lives will be back to normal, if not better. You, me, the kids, will be the perfect family. Isn't that what you've always wanted? Adrienne nodded, but deep inside, the seeds of doubt had been planted. Meanwhile, Griffin is meeting with a representative of the First Nations community to discuss how the Arctic Frontier project might affect their land and way of life. We have been reporting problems with the water source, Annika talked to explains, but government inspectors say the test results are within normal limits. But our fishermen have noticed an increase in fish diseases and some traditional medicinal plants have started to wither. Griffin showed the data collected by his team. These readings show that the pollution levels are much higher than the reported values. They are consistent with the changes observed in your community. Annika examined the data with an angry look on her face. We've been told all along that our concerns are not based on science. This proves us right. Arctic Frontier knew about this data, Griffin said, but they chose to ignore or cover it up. Why did you risk sharing this? Annika asked, what's in it for you? Griffin pondered the question. Because it's the right thing to do. And, honestly, because I understand what it's like to be betrayed and lied to. No one deserves to be treated like that. Annika nods, gratitude written all over her face. Your information could be a game changer. If we can prove that the contamination is related to ArcticFrontier's activities, we can stop their project until proper environmental remediation is done. I need you to know, Griffin warned, that opposing this program could be dangerous. There's a lot of money and power backing it up. Our people have been fighting for centuries. Annika says firmly, for our land, our way of life. It's just another fight. But with your evidence, we have a better chance of winning this fight. Griffin left the meeting feeling a new sense of purpose. His personal tragedy has led him to a greater cause, justice for those without a voice. His plan for revenge is evolving into something much more important. It's no longer just about him and Adrienne or Malcolm's betrayal. It's about doing the right thing, even at a personal cost. But Griffin remains determined to address all the issues, his rights to his children, and justice for those who tried to destroy his life. It would be nice to stop an environmental disaster at the same time. He took out his cell phone and dialed Elisa's number. I have new evidence, he said, not only about my case, but about possible corporate misconduct. I think it's time to take action. At the crossroads of life, choices often determine destiny. For Griffin Reed, he stands at a critical decision point, whether to choose a path of vengeance or seek a higher level of justice. After thinking it over, he chooses a path that protects his interests and those of his children while exposing a larger conspiracy. After detailed discussions with Elise, Griffin developed a two-pronged plan. First, he needs to make sure he has an ongoing relationship with his twin, regardless of the DNA results. Second, he needed to safely expose ArcticFrontier's environmental violations and Malcolm's possible misconduct without putting himself at legal risk. To accomplish the first goal, Griffin began preparing a comprehensive fatherhood role certificate. He collected 8 years of photos, videos, school records, and other evidence of his active involvement in the twins' lives. He contacted their teachers, coaches, and friends' parents to request testimony about his relationship with the children. The law is increasingly recognizing that parenting is more than biology, Elise explains, and we can build a strong case that you are their primary provider, despite not being related by blood. Malcolm may be their biological father, Griffin says firmly, but I'm the one who gets up in the middle of the night to take care of a kid with a fever. I'm the one who teaches them how to ride a bike. I'm the one who cheers them on at every one of their soccer games. Elise nodded. That's exactly our argument. In Quebec, the court will consider the best interests of the child, including the stability of emotional bonds. For the second goal, Griffin needs to be more careful. He has given environmental data to Annika and her community, but needs to share this information more widely, while protecting himself from backlash from ArcticFrontier and Malcolm. The solution came from an unexpected ally. Bethany, a former colleague of Adrienne's, reveals that she has a cousin who works in the mainstream media and specializes in covering environmental issues. She can make sure your identity is protected while getting the story out there, Bethany assures, and she's always on the lookout for groundbreaking stories like this. Griffin gratefully accepted the offer, but added, I need to make sure it doesn't look like personal revenge. It must focus on science and community impact. I'll make sure she understands that, Bethany promised. Meanwhile, Griffin continues to build a relationship with his twins, cherishing every visit. He noticed the children becoming quieter and quieter, sometimes looking confused and sad. Mom and Uncle Malcolm fight all day, Owen told him during a visit. And they think we can't hear, but we can. Caleb nodded in agreement. Uncle Malcolm says we need to forget about you and start calling him Dad. But we already have a dad. Griffin's heart is warmed by the children's loyalty, but also pained by the struggles they are going through. Sometimes adults make bad decisions. But no matter what happens, I will always be your dad, and I will always love you. Can we go home and stay with you? Caleb asked, tears in his eyes. Griffin felt a pang of pain. Not now, man. But I'm working on that. After leaving the visitation center, Griffin's resolve was even stronger. He won't let Malcolm and Adrienne's selfish behavior continue to hurt the children. Soon after, news reports about ArcticFrontier's environmental problems began to appear. What began as a small online publication expanded into the mainstream media. The report details the company's environmental violations and the potential risks to First Nations communities. After the news spread, government regulators announced a full investigation into the project. ArcticFrontier's share price began to fall as investors expressed concern. As Griffin expected, Malcolm was furious. In a chance encounter, his brother accuses him directly. "I know you did it," Malcolm growled as he stopped Griffin in the parking lot after he attended the visitation. "You think you're so smart, don't you? Leaking all that unsubstantiated data." Griffin stays calm. "I don't know what you're talking about. But if someone is leaking real data, then maybe ArcticFrontier should be more concerned about their environmental responsibility rather than trying to cover up the problem." Malcolm took a step forward, leaning in threateningly close. "You don't know what power you're fighting against. I can make sure you never see those kids again." "They're not objects, Malcolm," Griffin replied, his voice firm. "They're people with their own feelings and needs. They need stability and love, not to be drawn into adult power games." "Touching," Malcolm taunted. "But the law's on my side, brother. DNA doesn't lie." "Fatherhood is more than DNA," Griffin responded. "And someday you'll understand that." Malcolm sneered. "Don't act so noble. I know you're on some kind of revenge plan, but you won't win." "It's not about winning, Malcolm," Griffin said. "It's about doing the right thing. For the children, for the communities that may be affected by your client's behavior." Malcolm shook his head. "Always playing the good guy, aren't you, Griffin? That's why Adrienne finally chose me. She needs a man who can give her the life she wants, not an idealist who worries about others all the time." These words sting Griffin, but he refuses to take the bait. "If that's the case, then I feel sorry for her. Money and position are barren consolations when you have to live with a man who would betray his brother for gain." Malcolm's expression turned cold. "Be careful, Griffin. You don't know what I can do." "Actually, I'm beginning to understand," Griffin replied calmly, and walked to his car, leaving Malcolm standing there, fists clenched in anger. The confrontation strengthened Griffin's resolve. Malcolm's threats indicate that he feels pressured and may take more drastic action. Griffin needs to stay on his toes and make sure his plan doesn't backfire. As media coverage of ArcticFrontier's environmental problems expanded, pressures began to mount. Adrienne finds herself in an increasingly uncomfortable position. "Everyone's talking about it," she told Malcolm, skimming the news on her phone, "and my clients are asking me if I know anything about it. Some people have even canceled showings because they heard I had a relationship with an attorney at ArcticFrontier. It's starting to affect my business." Malcolm is busy on the phone, trying to control the damage. It's only temporary. Once our experts refute these so-called findings, everything will fall into place. "Are you sure?" Adrienne asked, skepticism in her voice. "These reports seem quite detailed." "They have the data, Malcolm." Malcolm put down the phone with a serious expression. "Those numbers were taken out of context." "Yes, there were some anomalous readings, but that could have been caused by a number of factors. ArcticFrontier is not the only company operating in that area. But what if the company knew about the problems but chose to cover them up?" Malcolm's gaze sharpened. "Why do you say that? What do you know?" Adrienne shook her head. "Nothing. Just, if Griffin is involved, he'll make sure there's hard evidence. He's not reckless." "Griffin, Griffin, Griffin," Malcolm scoffed. "When are you going to stop defending him? He's a loser, Adrienne. That's why we ended up together. You want more? You deserve more." "He's not a loser," Adrienne said calmly. "He's a good person." Malcolm stared at her. "What's going on here? Now you feel guilty for cheating on him? It's a little late, isn't it?" Adrienne looked out the window and was silent for a moment. "The children miss him. They kept asking when he was coming back. I don't know what to tell them." "Tell them the truth," Malcolm snapped. "Tell them I'm their real father and Griffin is just an imposter." Adrienne turned to him, a spark of anger in her eyes. "He raised them for 8 years. Where were you during that time? You may have provided the sperm, Malcolm, but that doesn't make you a father." Malcolm took a step back, surprised at her sudden outburst. "We've already discussed this. That was a decision we made together. I offer financial support, but keep my distance until the time is right." "Yes, convenient arrangement, isn't it?" Adrienne said bitterly. "You got me without having to take any responsibility, and Griffin did all the hard work." "What are you trying to say, Adrienne?" Malcolm asked, his voice low and dangerous. "You regret our arrangement now?" Adrienne takes a deep breath and calms down. I'm just saying that maybe we should rethink our strategy. Children have trouble adapting. Maybe we were too eager to push for this shift." Malcolm stared at her for a long moment. Then his voice softened. "Look, I know this is hard for you and the kids, but we've come so far. We can't go back. Give me a little more time to work out this circumstance, and then we can start over as a real family." Adrienne nods, but her eyes tell Malcolm that this conversation is far from over. She began to question their plans, their relationship, and what she was giving up for safety and stability. Later that same day, Griffin received a call from Annika. "The government has suspended ArcticFrontier's permit," she told him excitedly, "and they've sent an independent environmental assessment team to re-examine the area. Thanks to your data, they can no longer ignore our concerns." "This is good news," Griffin said, genuinely pleased. "And your community deserves to be treated fairly." It doesn't stop there. Annika continues. "There are rumors that some investors in the project are pulling out. They are concerned about possible legal liability and negative PR." Griffin considered the information. This could have a direct impact on Malcolm. If he has a personal financial interest in the project, he could face significant losses. "Do you think he'll give up?" "It won't. Malcolm never gives up what he wants," mused Griffin. "And in fact, that may make him even more dangerous. Stay alert." After hanging up, Griffin thought about the pressure Malcolm was under. If the project fails, if his investors pull out, he may become desperate. Griffin needs to protect himself and his children from a possible backlash. He decided to redouble his efforts to gather evidence about Malcolm's possible legal and ethical violations. If Malcolm decides to take more aggressive action, Griffin will need to have enough ammunition to fire back. Through Thomas's help, Griffin obtained more details about Malcolm's relationship with ArcticFrontier. The evidence showed that Malcolm was not only legal counsel for the company, but also held shares in the project through a complex shell company structure. This is a clear conflict of interest and a violation of the lawyer's code of ethics. Griffin provided the information to his attorney and media contacts, but asked them not to use it for now. He doesn't want to escalate the conflict immediately and hopes Malcolm will see sense and choose negotiation over confrontation. But he underestimated the extent of his brother's resolve and desperation. The next day, Griffin received a disturbing phone call. "It's Natalie, the mother of twin classmates." "Griffin," her voice was full of worry. "I just heard that Adrienne is planning to take the twins out of Quebec. Ryan told me Owen said they were moving to Vancouver very soon." Griffin's heart sank. "Are you sure? When do they leave?" "I'm not sure of the exact date, but Owen told Ryan they were saying goodbye this weekend." "Griffin, if this is true, you need to take immediate action." Griffin thanked her for the information and immediately contacted Elise. "They can't just take the kids," he told her, his voice tight with urgency. "I have temporary visitation rights. If they plan to leave the province, they should notify the court," Elise agreed, "and let me file an emergency motion to stop them from taking the children until our custody hearing is over." Griffin hung up the phone and felt a wave of panic wash over him. If Malcolm and Adrienne leave with the twins, he may never see them again. He couldn't let that happen. Without much thought, he dialed Adrienne's number. To his surprise, she answered the phone. "Is this true?" he asked directly. "Are you going to take the twins away?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line, then a soft reply from Adrienne. "I don't want to do this, Griffin. It was Malcolm's idea. He said we need to get away from the pressure here, away from you." "You can't do that, Adrienne," Griffin pleaded. "That's kidnapping. I have legal visitation rights." "I know." Her voice sounded surprisingly tired. "I told him, but he said he had connections and could handle the legalities." "Listen to me," Griffin said, choosing his words carefully. "No matter what Malcolm tells you, it's against the law to take a child out of the province without court permission. You could lose custody and even face criminal charges." Silence again, then, "I don't know what to do, Griffin. Everything's gone to shit." Griffin heard the desperation and confusion in her voice and realized this could be an opportunity to reconnect. "Can we talk? Not through a lawyer, just the two of us. For the children." Another pause, then, "Okay. Tomorrow morning, at the old cafe. 10 o'clock. I'll be there," Griffin promised. "Thank you, Adrienne." After hanging up, Griffin wasn't sure what had just happened. Adrienne sounds almost regrettable. Is this a trap? Or is she really starting to question her decision with Malcolm? In any case, It was an opportunity he couldn't pass up. If there is any hope of convincing Adrienne not to take the children, Griffin must seize it. The cafe was where they dated, years ago, before the twins were born. Griffin chose the corner table where they had often sat, and memories flooded back. Everything was so simple then, so hopeful. Adrienne was 15 minutes late, and when she walked in, Griffin immediately noticed how tired she looked. She had dark circles under her eyes, and her usually immaculate attire was slightly disheveled. "Thanks for coming," Griffin said when she sat down. She nodded and looked out the window. "Malcolm doesn't know I'm here. He'll go crazy if he finds out." Griffin signaled the waiter. "Would you like coffee?" "Tea," she said. "I'm not much of a coffee drinker these days." An awkward silence descended as the waitress left. Two people who had once been so close were now sitting across from each other like strangers. "Why, Adrienne?" Griffin eventually asked, his voice calm and non-accusatory. "Did I do something?" She shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "It wasn't you, Griffin. It was never you. It's me. I want more. Something better. With my brother? Behind my back? Is that what you want better?" "It seemed so simple at the time," she said softly. "Malcolm had ambitions and plans. He said we could have it all together. A better house, a better life, the best opportunities for kids." "Those kids?" Griffin asked carefully. "Were they always his?" Adrienne nodded, tears slipping down her face. "Yes. It happened shortly after we were married. Do you remember that time I went to a real estate conference in Toronto? Malcolm was there. We had too much to drink, and in the heat of the moment, when I found out I was pregnant, I wasn't sure whose baby it was. And then you took a paternity test?" "Yes," Malcolm insisted. "I should have told you the truth when the results came back and showed he was the father. But I'm afraid of losing you, of losing our life. So I hid it." Griffin took a deep breath to calm himself. "So it was a lie that lasted 8 years. It started out as a lie," Adrienne admits. "But over time, Malcolm became more involved. He offered money, but asked for access to the children. When he moved to Montreal, everything became more complicated. He wanted to be a part of their lives, and he saw an opportunity." "ArcticFrontier," Griffin finished her sentence. Adrienne looked at him in surprise. "You knew?" "I pieced together most of the situation. Malcolm has a personal investment in the program, right? When he found out that I might be threatening the program because of environmental issues, he decided to take action." Adrienne nods. "He said it was perfect timing. By exposing the truth, he can solve 2 problems at once: discredit you and pave the way for his takeover of the family." Griffin felt sick to his stomach but kept his cool. "Now the program is in trouble, so he wants to escape with you and the kids." "He said it was only temporary," Adrienne said, uncertainty in her voice, "until things settle down. But I'm afraid once we leave, we'll never come back." "Griffin, I don't want to keep the kids away from their school, their friends. Away from you." Griffin was surprised at her confession. "Why are you telling me this now?" Adrienne finally looked him straight in the eye. "Because I saw the damage I caused. For you, for the kids. They ask you every day. They miss you. And Malcolm, he's changed. He's always been ambitious, but now it's almost obsessive. All he cares about is the program and the money. He doesn't even play with the kids." "Things could get worse," Griffin warned, as the media began investigating Malcolm's ties to ArcticFrontier. "It may expose his conflicts of interest, and there may even be legal consequences." Adrienne didn't look surprised. "I guessed. He's been taking all sorts of calls and meeting with lawyers and investors. He was in a hurry. That's why he suddenly wanted to leave." "Adrienne," Griffin leaned forward, his voice urgent, "you don't have to follow him. I can help you. We can find a solution for the kids, one that doesn't involve running away." She hesitated, clearly struggling. "But what will Malcolm do if I stay?" "He'll be pissed." "He might." "Did he threaten you?" Griffin asked sharply. "Not directly," Adrienne replied. "But his temper is getting worse. Sometimes his eyes. It scares me." Griffin realizes the situation may be more dangerous than he thought. "Listen to me. If you're worried about your safety, there are resources to help you." "It's not just my safety," Adrienne admitted. "I'm worried that if I don't follow his plan, he might hurt you. He hates your guts, Griffin. He always has been." The revelation didn't surprise Griffin. The tension between him and Malcolm goes back to his childhood, but he never expected it to grow to this level. "I can handle Malcolm," Griffin said firmly. "But we need to prioritize the safety and well-being of the children. They need stability and the love of both parents, no matter who they are. Adrienne seemed to consider his words. You said you could help. How can I help? First of all, don't take the kids away. Let my attorney work with your attorney to develop a temporary custody agreement that will ensure stability for the twins. In the meantime, if you are concerned that Malcolm may become dangerous, we can arrange protection. He won't let me go if I disobey him, Adrienne whispered. He will ultimately face the consequences of his actions, Griffin assured, adding that media attention will only increase and regulators are investigating. He can't keep running. Adrienne looked at him for a long time and finally nodded. Okay, I'm not taking the kids away, but you must promise me you'll be careful. You have no idea how desperate Malcolm is. I'll be careful, Griffin promised, then added. Thank you for coming today and for your honesty. It's the right decision for the kids. As they parted, Adrienne paused. Griffin, I'm so sorry. For everything. I know it doesn't make up for what I did, but I want you to know that I really regret it. Griffin nodded, unable to fully forgive, but understanding that she was struggling. Take care of the kids. My attorney will contact you. When Adrienne left, Griffin stayed behind to finish his coffee and think about the conversation. He gains valuable information, but also confirms that Malcolm may be more dangerous than he thought. He needs to be very careful with the next steps. He pulled out his cell phone and texted Elise with an update, then called Vincent. I need a little extra security, he told his friends and supervisors. Malcolm might do something desperate. Vincent's voice expressed concern. You think he's going to physically harm you? I'm not sure, Griffin replied honestly. But I don't want to take any chances. Well, Vincent said, I'll arrange for extra security at the office, and we can make sure you don't work alone in remote areas. Where's your apartment? I'll be vigilant, Griffin promised, and probably install some security cameras. Do what you need to do, Vincent said firmly. And remember that we're all here to support you if you need any help. Griffin thanked his friend and hung up. He wasn't sure if Adrienne would tell Malcolm about their meeting, but he needed to be prepared just in case. The next few days could be critical, and he needs to stay alert. Griffin didn't expect things to move so quickly. The next morning, the headlines shocked everyone. ArcticFrontier's CEO was arrested on suspicion of securities fraud and environmental violations. The ensuing investigation triggered intense scrutiny of the company's executives and legal counsel. The news report further details how the company systematically falsified environmental data and made false statements to investors and regulators. Although Malcolm's name does not appear directly, as the company's chief counsel, he is certainly at the center of the investigation. Griffin had just left his makeshift apartment and was getting ready for work when he received an urgent call from Adrienne. Malcolm went crazy, she said urgently, fear in her voice. He saw the news and started smashing things and threatening everyone. He said you've ruined everything and he'll make you pay. Griffin, I've never seen him like this. Griffin was immediately alert. Where are you and the kids? Are you guys safe? We're fine. He went out and said he needed to take care of something. But Griffin, I'm afraid he'll come after you. You stay home, lock the doors and windows, Griffin instructed. And if he returns and displays any threatening behavior, call the police immediately. Do you have somewhere else to go? Friends or family? Yes, I can take the kids to my sister's house. Then go there, Griffin said firmly. Pack some necessities at once and leave. Tell the school not to let the children leave with anyone for a while, except you or your sister. What about you? Adrienne asked, worry in her voice. What if he comes for you? I'll be careful, Griffin promised, while already considering a response. I'll notify the police about the threat and make sure I'm not alone. Immediately after hanging up, Griffin called Elise to give her an update. We can get a protective order, she suggested, based on these threats. Prepare first, Griffin agreed. But I don't want to escalate matters immediately unless absolutely necessary. The next call was to the police to report Malcolm's threat. They documented the information, but frankly told Griffin that there was only so much they could do unless there was a specific action or a more immediate threat. Finally, Griffin called Vincent and explained the situation. Don't come to work, Vincent said immediately, and stay home until things settle down. I can't just hide, Griffin objected. It's not about hiding, Vincent insisted. It's about not taking unnecessary risks. Stay home and keep a low profile. I'll send someone to your place to install some extra security measures. Griffin reluctantly agrees, realizing Vincent is right. It's not worth the risk. He went back to his apartment, locked the door, and then began to think about his next move. Two technicians from the security company arrived a few hours later and quickly installed security cameras and improved door locks. Griffin thanked them for their prompt response. Throughout the day, Griffin followed news reports for updates on the ArcticFrontier investigation. Things are looking worse and worse for Malcolm and other executives at the company. Stock prices plummeted, investors began filing lawsuits, and environmental groups and First Nations communities demanded full accountability. Later in the afternoon, Griffin received a text message from Adrienne confirming that she and the twins had arrived safely at her sister's house. It was a relief to him that at least the children were safe. However, his serenity was interrupted by the doorbell. Through a newly installed camera, Griffin saw Thomas Reeves standing in the doorway, Malcolm's former coworker. Griffin opened the door cautiously. "Thomas? What happened?" Thomas looked nervous. "I need to talk to you. It's about Malcolm. The situation is more dangerous than you think." Griffin let him in and scanned the hallway warily to make sure no one was following Thomas. "Malcolm came by the office this morning." Thomas began to explain once the door was closed. And he looked. "It's not right." He yells and accuses everyone of betraying him, then starts deleting files and taking away folders. When the managing partner tried to stop him, he almost did. They had to call security to escort him out. Griffin frowned. "Where is he now?" "I don't know." Thomas shook his head, but he said something about solving the root of the problem when he left. "Griffin, I think he might be referring to you." Griffin felt a chill run down his spine. "You think he's really going to hurt me?" "I don't know what else he could have done," Thomas said honestly. "He's lost everything. His job, his reputation, and probably his law license. The failure of the project will cost him millions. He's desperate." Griffin nods, thanking Thomas for the warning. "I'll stay alert. The police are aware of the situation." Thomas stood up and got ready to leave. "Be careful, Griffin. Malcolm has never been a good loser." When Thomas left, Griffin rechecked all the door and window locks to make sure the security system was working properly. He considers contacting Adrienne, but decides not to bother her and the children. They need peace and security now. As night falls, Griffin tries to stay calm, but every sound, every shadow makes him nervous. As much as he didn't want to admit it, he was scared. Not for myself, but for what might happen. Things seemed to have gotten completely out of hand, evolving from a marital crisis to a possible threat of violence. Just as he was about to go to bed, his cell phone rang. It's an unknown number. "Hello." He answered cautiously. "Griffin." It was Vincent's voice, sounding nervous. "Where are you?" "At home. Why?" "Listen," Vincent said quickly. "Security just called me. The surveillance system shows someone trying to enter your apartment building. The camera caught Malcolm. He looks not quite right." Griffin's heart raced. "Do the police know?" "Yes, they're on their way, but you need to get out of there immediately. He's probably already in the building." Griffin took a quick look at his door and suddenly felt very exposed. "Okay, I'm on my way." "Go to the back door," Vincent instructed. "One of my security guards will meet you there. Don't let anyone see you leave." Griffin hangs up and quickly grabs his wallet, keys, and cell phone. He quietly opened the door and looked around, then quickly headed for the back stairs. The building was surprisingly quiet, with only a faint glow from the emergency lights. Griffin walked softly down the stairs, every sound amplified in the empty stairwell. As he reached the bottom, he heard footsteps coming from above. He freezes and holds his breath. The footsteps paused for a moment, then continued down, getting closer. Griffin found the passage leading to the back door and pushed it open and dashed off into the night. As Vincent said, a security guard was waiting there, standing next to a running car. "Mr. Reed," the guard shouted. "Quick, get in the car." Griffin sprinted toward the car, but just as he was about to reach it, a voice came from the shadows. "Just leave it like that, bro." Griffin turned and saw Malcolm standing a few meters away, holding something in his hand. In the dim light, Griffin couldn't be sure what it was, but his instincts told him it was dangerous. "Malcolm," Griffin tried to keep his voice steady. "We can talk." "Talk?" Malcolm sneered, taking a step forward. "Talk about what? How did you ruin everything for me?" The security guard began to approach slowly, his hand going to his waist. "Sir, please drop the item you are holding." Malcolm stared at the guard. "It's none of your business. It's a family matter." "Malcolm," Griffin tried again. Think of the children. They need you. You still have a chance to do the right thing. The right thing. Malcolm let out a laugh that was hardly human. What's the right thing to do, Griffin? You're the one who leaked the damn environmental data behind my back. Are you the one who sabotaged my project? Or did you try to steal my baby? They're not objects, Malcolm, Griffin said firmly. They're people, with their own needs and feelings. Malcolm shook his head. It's always about pretending to be a moral model. That's your problem, Griffin. You never understood how to fight for what you want. And you never understand that some things can't be gained through deception and manipulation, Griffin responded. Malcolm's expression twisted into a mask of rage. Enough. Just then, sirens sounded in the distance. Malcolm hears a voice, hesitates, and then makes a decision. He rushes toward Griffin, the object in his hand glinting in the faint light. The security guards move quickly to get in front of Griffin. The two wrestled and Griffin heard a muffled thud before the guard went down. Griffin had no time to think, turned and ran. He heard Malcolm chasing after him. Fear drove him forward, across the parking lot, and toward the road. The sirens are getting closer, but Malcolm doesn't seem to care. He was hot on his heels like a hunter, determined to catch his prey. Griffin ran toward the lights and the crowd, hoping to find witnesses and safety. As he turned a corner, he saw several police cars parked on the street and police evacuating the area. "Help me," Griffin shouted, running toward them. The police saw him and then Malcolm, who was chasing him. They immediately drew their weapons and shouted, "Police, don't move." Malcolm stops and looks at the cop, then at Griffin. A range of emotions flashed across his face. Anger, hatred, and finally a strange calm. "It ain't over yet, brother," he whispered, then suddenly turned and ran into the darkness. Several officers gave chase while others protected Griffin and took him to a police car. "Are you all right, sir?" an officer asked. Griffin nodded and gasped. "Yes, I think so. Security. He needs help. It's in the back parking lot." Police immediately radioed for medical assistance while continuing to protect Griffin. "We need to take you to the station for a statement," the officer explained. "Your brother has been a threat to multiple people." Griffin sat in the police car, his body shaking with adrenaline and fear. Things had gone far beyond his imagination. A marital crisis has turned into a violent confrontation. What hurt him the most was that the twins would have to face the consequences of all this. News quickly spreads throughout the city. Prominent attorney Malcolm Reed is wanted for assault and attempted murder. The media enthusiastically covered the story, digging up all the details about the ArcticFrontier scandal and the complex relationship between the brothers. Despite Griffin's attempts to protect the children from media attention, everyone soon learned of the family's tragedy. Adrienne and the twins continue to live at her sister's house, now under police protection. Malcolm is still at large, but police believe he may have left the city and perhaps the country. Griffin stayed at a secure hotel for a few days and then, on the advice of the police, temporarily moved to Vincent's vacation home on the other side of town. "Are you sure this won't get you in trouble?" Griffin asked his friends and supervisors. Vincent shook his head. "Not at all. To be honest, I rarely come here. At least someone is using it now." Accompanied by the police, Griffin ventured back to Adrienne's house, his former home, to collect some personal belongings and important documents. The house felt strange and cold, like an abandoned stage set rather than a home that had once been filled with laughter and love. Adrienne wasn't there, but she left a note on the kitchen counter. "Griffin, I'm sorry it's come to this. I never thought it would be like this. The twins are safe, but they miss you. When circumstances permit, please contact me and we can arrange for you to meet them. Be careful. Adrienne." Griffin folded the note and put it in his pocket, feeling mixed emotions. He wasn't sure he could ever forgive Adrienne for her betrayal, but he appreciated her attempts to do the right thing now. Over the next few days, Griffin followed the news closely, looking for news about Malcolm. Authorities have frozen his assets, revoked his law license, and issued a nationwide warrant. But his whereabouts are still unknown. A week later, Vincent brought shocking news. "They think he may have gone to Mexico," Vincent told Griffin, "and a surveillance camera near the border caught someone who looked like him." Griffin shook his head. "This is really turning into an international manhunt. Do you think he'll come back?" Vincent asked, his voice revealing concern. Griffin thought for a moment. Malcolm has never been the type to take defeat well. But I also don't think he'd risk coming back just for revenge. He's too smart to do that. I hope so, Vincent said. Regardless, the authorities still advise you to remain vigilant. I will, Griffin promised, but I can't hide forever. I need to get some kind of normal life back for the kids. The next day, Griffin received a call from Elise, his lawyer. The judge agreed to an emergency hearing, she told him, and he's willing to reevaluate the custody arrangement given the unique circumstances. Did Adrienne agree? Griffin asked. Yes, Elise replied, sounding a little surprised. In fact, her attorney indicated that she would be willing to consider joint custody, even though there is no blood relationship. She really seems to want what's best for the kids. Griffin felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe there is something to salvage from this tragedy. Maybe the twins don't have to lose either parent in their lives. The hearing is scheduled for 2 days later. During this time, Griffin had long talks with his therapist in an attempt to deal with the trauma and stress of the past few weeks. The effects of all this on children can last for years, the therapist warns. They need stability, honesty, and to know that despite all the chaos in the adult world, they are still loved. Griffin nods. I'll do what I can to provide that for them. On the day of the hearing, Griffin put on his best suit and headed to court with a detailed paternity plan. The plan includes how he will ensure the emotional and physical health of the twins and how he will work with Adrienne to give the children a stable environment despite all that has happened. To his surprise, when he arrived at the courthouse, Adrienne was already waiting there, looking tired but determined. Thanks for coming, she whispered as he approached. I'll never give them up, Griffin replied simply. I know, she said, tears glistening in her eyes. That's why I believe this arrangement is the right one. The judge heard both parties and reviewed the evidence and recommendations. Given the unique nature of the situation and the important role Griffin played in the children's lives, the judge approved a temporary joint custody agreement that allowed Griffin significant visitation time while Adrienne maintained primary custody. This arrangement will be reassessed in 6 months, the judge announced. And if all goes well, we can consider a more permanent solution. Walking out of the courtroom, Griffin felt both relieved and cautiously optimistic. It's not the perfect ending, but it's a start. He will continue to play an important role in the twins' lives, and that's the most important thing. Can I visit them tomorrow? He asked Adrienne. She nodded, sure. They'll be glad to see you. Just as Griffin was about to leave, his cell phone rang. It's Vincent. There's news, Vincent said, his voice strained. The police just spotted Malcolm's car near the border. But he's not in the car. Griffin felt a pang of unease. You think he's back? I don't know, Vincent replied honestly. But the authorities are stepping up their protection of you and Adrienne's home. Griffin looked at Adrienne, not wanting to cause panic in front of her. Thanks for the info. I'll be careful. After hanging up, Griffin decided not to tell Adrienne the news right away. She's been through enough stress already. There's no need to add to her fears for now. However, he did offer to drive her home. Let me drive you home. I was going to go that direction. Adrienne accepted gratefully, and the two walked in silence to the parking lot. As they reached the car, Griffin suddenly had a strange premonition. He stopped and scrutinized his surroundings. What's wrong? Adrienne asked, noting his hesitation. It's probably nothing, Griffin said, scanning the parking lot. Just wait a minute. He slowly walked around the car, scrutinizing it. When he crouched down to look under the car, he saw it. A small device attached to the chassis that didn't belong there. Griffin's heart raced. He quickly stood up and grabbed Adrienne's arm. We need to get out of here. Now. She looked at him, confused and alarmed. What happened? I think someone put something in my car, Griffin whispered, not wanting to cause a panic. We need to contact the police. Just as they turned to leave, Griffin noticed a figure at the other end of the parking lot. Even at that distance, he could recognize the silhouette. The Malcolm. He's here, Griffin gasped, pushing Adrienne in the opposite direction. Come on. They began running toward the courthouse, Griffin calling 911 as he ran. But just as they were about to reach the entrance, a loud explosion shook the entire parking lot. Griffin instinctively pushes Adrienne to the ground, using his body to protect her. Debris and heat waves hit them, but they were far enough away not to be hurt. Screams and sirens filled the air. Griffin looked up and saw that his car had been reduced to a burning wreck. If they're in there, are you okay? He asked Adrienne, and she nodded, too shocked to speak. Griffin looks around for Malcolm, but he's gone. In the confusion, he may have escaped. Police and emergency services arrived at the scene shortly after. Griffin and Adrienne were taken to a secure location to be examined and have their statements taken. "How did you know to check the car?" the investigator asked Griffin. "A hunch," Griffin replied. "Plus, I just got word that Malcolm's car was spotted, but he wasn't in it. I'm worried he might come back and finish what he started." The investigator nodded. "Good thing you listened to your gut." Initial examination suggests it was an improvised explosive device, possibly remotely detonated. Griffin shuddered, thinking of their near deaths. "Where do you think Malcolm went?" "We have the entire city's police force looking for him," the investigator assured. "He won't get far." But Griffin isn't so sure. Malcolm was always smart and organized. He wouldn't risk coming back for revenge unless he believed he could get away with it. Adrienne was taken to a secure location with police protection. She clung to Griffin's hand before parting. What happens to the twins if we die?" she asked in a low voice, her voice trembling with fear. "We're not dead," Griffin said firmly. "And we're not going to let him get away with it. We'll make sure the kids are safe." Adrienne nodded, determination shining in her eyes. "I need to see them. Make sure they're okay." "Go on," Griffin said. "The police will protect you. I'll be in touch as soon as I can." As Adrienne was escorted away, Griffin turned to the investigator. "I need a safe place too. I don't think Malcolm will stop there." "We've made arrangements," assured the investigator, "and we'll keep you safe until we catch him." Griffin was taken to a safe house protected by armed guards. As night falls, he sits at the window wondering where Malcolm is now and what his next plan is. This nightmare never seems to end. A simple life, a family that was once full of love and hope, has now been completely destroyed by betrayal and violence. Griffin wonders if they will be able to recover from this, and if it might be possible to rebuild some sort of normal life for the twins. He pulls out his cell phone and checks the photo Adrienne sent a few hours ago, the twins playing in her sister's backyard, looking almost as carefree as usual. It gave him a glimmer of hope. Maybe, despite all this, they can still give their children the childhood they deserve. But first, they need to make sure Malcolm is no longer a threat. The next morning, Griffin was taken to the police station accompanied by a guard. The director wants to see him. He has important news to share. "We think we have Malcolm's location," the chief told him, "and security cameras caught him entering a downtown hotel last night. We have SWAT teams on standby there now." Griffin felt a surge of hope. "Do you think you can catch him?" "We're making final preparations," the chief explained, "but we wanted to check one thing with you. Our intelligence suggests that Malcolm may be preparing to leave the country. He booked a ticket to fly to Brazil tomorrow, using a fake passport." Griffin shook his head. He always had a backup plan. "We won't let him get away with it," the chief said firmly, "but we need to be careful. He may still be dangerous and may have more explosive devices ready." Griffin thought of the possibility. He might try to take the twins. The director nodded. "We've increased protection at Adrienne's sister's house. The kids are safe." "I need to confirm this in person," Griffin insisted. "Can I go there?" The director hesitated for a moment, then agreed. "We can arrange for a police escort for you, but you need to keep a low profile and follow all safety protocols." Griffin thanked the chief and was about to leave when he asked, "What happens if you catch him?" "He will be facing multiple serious charges," the director replied. "Attempted murder, assault, and possibly corporate crimes related to the ArcticFrontier project. He's likely to spend a lot of time in jail." Griffin nodded, feeling a mixture of emotions. Malcolm is still Griffin's brother, despite all the horrible things he's done. At one time, they were each other's only family. Now they're enemies. When Griffin is escorted by police to Adrienne's sister's house, he realizes that there is already a visible police presence around the house. 2 plainclothes officers were sitting in a car parked across the street, while another officer patrolled the end of the street. Adrienne's sister Lorraine opens the door to greet him with a serious expression. "Are they okay?" Griffin asked immediately. Lorraine nodded. "They're playing in the garden. Adrienne received a message about Malcolm a few minutes ago." She was shocked. Griffin walked through the house and into the backyard to see the twins playing their favorite game. Adrienne sat nearby, watching them with a worried expression on her face. When the twins saw Griffin, they cheered and ran to him. "Dad!" they cried out, flinging themselves into his arms. He hugged them tightly, and thank them for their safety. Are you coming to take us home? Owen asked, hopefully. Griffin glanced at Adrienne before replying. Not yet, man. But soon. I promise. Can we play with you? Caleb asked. Sure, Griffin said with a smile. I've got all day to spend with you guys. As the children happily run back to their game, Griffin walks over to Adrienne. Are you okay? He asked. She shook her head. I don't know if I'll ever feel good again. I know the feeling, Griffin admits. But for the sake of the kids, we need to try. They sat down together and watched the twins play, briefly pretending everything was normal. But reality soon returned to their conversation. They said they might know where Malcolm is, Adrienne whispered. Do you think they'll catch him? I hope so, Griffin replied. For everyone's sake. Adrienne looked away. I never thought it would come to this. When I betrayed you, I thought we were just looking for a better life. I never thought it would lead to such chaos and pain. Griffin took a deep breath. Choices always have consequences, Adrienne. I think we all understand that now. I just wish the kids didn't have to pay for our mistakes, she whispered. Just then, Griffin's cell phone rang. It's an investigator for the police department. Mr. Reed. The investigator's voice sounded tense. We entered the hotel room, but Malcolm wasn't there. The room looked like it had been rushed out and many of his personal belongings were still there, including his fake passport. Griffin's heart sank. So where is he? We don't know, the investigator admitted, but we found something disturbing in the room. There are maps, photos of your current location, and materials for making explosive devices. Griffin was immediately alert and looked around. You think he's coming here? It's a possibility, the investigator said, and we're sending additional personnel to your location. In the meantime, it is recommended that you and everyone else stay indoors and away from windows until we are sure it is safe. Griffin hung up and immediately told Adrienne the situation. Her face turned white with fear. Kids, she shouted, running towards the twins. Griffin follows her and helps her bring the children back inside, trying not to cause them to panic. Hey guys, he said, pretending to be casual. Why don't we play an indoor game? The twins protested, but after seeing the serious expressions on their parents' faces, they obediently followed into the house. Once indoors, Griffin helped Lorraine check that all doors and windows were locked, and then contacted the police outside to update the situation. Reinforcements are about 5 minutes away, the cop told him, and we'll hold the perimeter. Griffin thanked him, then returned to the living room to find Adrienne calming the children. Why can't we play anymore? Owen complained. Because it might be raining. Adrienne made up, even though the sun was shining outside the window. Griffin knew the kids wouldn't believe this. They are smart enough to sense adult tension. Look, guys, he crouched down and leveled with them. Sometimes adults need to make sure everything is safe. As STH, like a fire drill. We need to stay indoors for a little while until we're sure everything's okay outside. The twins didn't look too convinced, but accepted the explanation. Lorraine offered to take them to the basement to play board games, where there were no windows and it was safer. As the children follow Lorraine downstairs, Griffin and Adrienne remain in the parlor, nervously waiting. Do you think he'll actually come here? Adrienne asked in a low, shaky voice. Griffin wasn't sure. I don't know. But if he does come, the police will catch him. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden shout from outside. Griffin cautiously approaches the window and peers out over the edge of the curtains. He saw the police officers drawing their weapons and pointing them at something on the other side of the street. Following their gaze, Griffin saw Malcolm standing across the street, holding something in his hand. There he is, Griffin whispered. The police have found him. Adrienne joins him and sees her lover and the biological father of her children, now a dangerous fugitive, standing there looking almost unrecognizable. His hair was disheveled, his clothes were rumpled, and there was a wild gleam in his eyes that Griffin had never seen before. Drop the device you are holding and surrender immediately, the police shouted through the loudspeaker. Malcolm didn't move, just stared at the house as if he could see through the walls to the people inside. Will he surrender? Adrienne asked, her voice barely audible. I don't think he intends to surrender, Griffin replied, seeing the look on Malcolm's face. It was the look of someone who had lost everything and was fearless. Suddenly, Malcolm began moving toward the house, ignoring police warnings. The cop pulls the safety and prepares to shoot. No, Adrienne shouted, not wanting violence where the children might hear it. It was at that moment that Malcolm raised the device in his hand. Griffin couldn't be sure what it was, but his instincts told him it was dangerous. Get down, Griffin shouts, pushing Adrienne to the ground just as the police shoot him. Gunshots echoed through the silent streets. When Griffin carefully looked up and out, he saw Malcolm on the ground, the device in his hand tumbling aside. The police approached cautiously, weapons still pointed at him. Is he dead? Adrienne asked, her voice trembling. Griffin couldn't be sure until he saw the paramedics rush to Malcolm's body and begin administering first aid. I think he's alive, Griffin said, and they're trying to save him. Adrienne whimpered, conflicting emotions flashing across her face. No matter what Malcolm had done, he was still the father of her children and had been the man she had loved. The basement door opens, and the twins and Lorraine appear on the stairs with fear on their faces. Was that a gunshot? Owen asked, his voice trembling. Griffin and Adrienne exchange a look before Griffin walks over to the kids. Yeah, guys, he replied honestly, knowing that lying would only make things worse. There was a dangerous man out there, but the police took care of it. We're safe now. Is it Uncle Malcolm? Caleb asked suddenly, shocking all the adults. Griffin and Adrienne looked at each other again, unsure of how to respond. Why would you think that? Griffin asked carefully. We heard Mom arguing with him, Owen explains, and he said he'd get you out of our lives, whatever it takes. He sounds terrible. Griffin's heart agonized over the children's exposure to this fear. He crouched down and pulled them closer. Yes, that's Uncle Malcolm, he said softly. He's got a lot of problems right now and needs help. But he won't hurt any of us. I promise. The twins nodded, though their eyes were filled with confusion and fear. They were too young to fully comprehend what was happening, but old enough to feel the fear and tension around them. Outside, Malcolm was loaded into an ambulance. The police officer approached the house and knocked on the door to indicate that it was safe. When Griffin opened the door, the investigator told him, he's alive, but in serious condition. He was hit in the chest. They are taking him to the hospital. What's that in his hand? Griffin asked. It looks like a detonator, the investigator replied gravely. We found an explosive device on the street corner. If he detonates it, casualties could be severe. Griffin nodded, feeling a wave of nausea. His brother had degenerated to the point where he was ready to kill innocent people, including children, just for revenge. We need you and your family to stay here until we have secured the area completely, the investigator continued. The EOD team is checking the surrounding area for any other devices. Griffin agreed, closing the door and turning to the waiting family. They say he's alive, but in serious condition, he told Adrienne, and they're taking him to the hospital. Adrienne nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. Is this finally over? Griffin hopes so, but he knows somehow that the effects of this tragedy will last for years, especially for twins. The physical threat may be over, he replied softly, but we still have a long way to go before we can truly recover from all this. Adrienne nods her head in understanding, then turns to the children, trying to calm them. Hours later, police finally declared the area safe. They found a second explosive device hidden in the bushes near the house, but it had been successfully defused. In the evening, Griffin received a message from the hospital. Malcolm died on the operating table and didn't make it. When Griffin breaks the news to Adrienne, she weeps silently, a mixture of sadness and relief. What about the kids? She finally asked, how do we tell them who their real father is and what happened? Not now, Griffin said. They're too young now to understand the complexity of it all. When they are older and ready, we will tell them the truth. At the same time, they need stability and love. Adrienne nodded in agreement. You'll stay in their lives? Always, Griffin promised. No matter what happens between us, I will always be their father. DNA doesn't change that. A year later, heavy shadows still loom over their lives, but light is beginning to penetrate as well. Griffin and Adrienne have established a stable joint custody arrangement focused on providing the twins with as normal a childhood as possible. Malcolm's death was explained to the children as an accident, details of which will be given when they are older. For now, they know that Uncle Malcolm has gone far away and will not return. The legal hearing affirmed Griffin's status as legal guardian of the twins, even though he is not related to them by blood. The judge recognized the deep emotional bond he had with the children and the positive impact he had in their lives. The Arctic Frontier scandal led to the company's bankruptcy and executives facing multiple criminal charges. More importantly, Aboriginal communities have received large-scale compensation for environmental cleanup and medical monitoring. Griffin is back at work, but in a changed role. He is now responsible for overseeing environmental compliance and ensuring that the company's programs do not repeat Arctic Frontier's mistakes. Adrienne sells their home and moves to the other side of town, hoping to get away from the painful memories. She is still a realtor, but is more concerned with ethical practices and refuses to work with developers who have environmental concerns. Regarding Malcolm, the investigation continues to reveal the scope of his program. He had apparently prepared multiple explosive devices with the intention of causing maximum damage if he was unable to capture Griffin and Adrienne. Documents found on his laptop suggest that he had fallen into despair, believing that if he couldn't have a family, then no one should. For Griffin, it was painful to learn that his brother had fallen so far. He often pondered what led Malcolm down this dark path. Are there always signs that this darkness lurks within him? Was there anything that could have been done to prevent this tragedy? In a session with a psychotherapist, Griffin expressed these thoughts. "You can't be responsible for someone else's choices, Griffin," the therapist said gently. Malcolm made his own decision. He chose betrayal and manipulation over honesty and love. "But he was my brother," Griffin said, feeling a deep sadness. "And I should have known him better." Sometimes the people closest to us are also the ones who hide their true selves the most, the therapist responded. "What matters is how you move forward now and how you create a healthy environment for the twins." Griffin nodded, knowing she was right. He can't change the past, but he can influence the future. One day, when he picks up the twins for the weekend, Owen asks an unexpected question. "Daddy," the boy asked gravely, "are you really our father?" Griffin felt his heart skip a beat. "What makes you ask that question?" Owen kicks at the gravel under his feet. "There's a boy at school who says you're not our real father. He said Uncle Malcolm was the one." Griffin sighed, realizing that this conversation may have come sooner than he expected. He crouched down and leveled his eyes with the two boys. "Families are complex," he began, choosing his words carefully. "Some fathers help create children, while others help raise them. Sometimes the same person does both. Sometimes different people do these things. So, you're not the one who helped create us?" Caleb asked, clearly struggling to understand. "Yes," Griffin said honestly. "Technically, Uncle Malcolm was the one who helped create you. But it's me who has been there since the day you were born, loving you and raising you. In my heart, this makes me your father." The twins exchanged a look, then Owen asked, "Does Mommy know?" "Yes, she knows," Griffin admits. "It's a complicated adult situation, and one day, when you're older, we'll tell you all the details. But the most important thing right now is that you know you are loved, no matter what happens." "But if Uncle Malcolm is our biological father," Caleb said, having obviously learned the term, "why does he never really act like a father?" Griffin felt a pang of pain, wondering how to answer the question without saying something bad about Malcolm. "Sometimes adults make choices that are hard to understand," he said eventually, "but it's not your fault. It's never your fault. Uncle Malcolm has his own problems to deal with that are none of your business." "Can we still call you Dad?" Owen asked, a hint of unease in his voice. Griffin felt tears well up in his eyes. "Sure. I'll always be your dad. Nothing is going to change that." The twins seemed to accept this explanation, at least for the time being. Griffin knows that as they grow, there will be more questions, more difficult conversations. But for now, that's enough. That night, when the kids were asleep, Griffin called Adrienne and told her about the conversation. "I guess it was bound to happen sooner or later," she said, sounding tired. "Do you think they understood?" "There's enough understanding for their age," Griffin replied. "But as they get older, we need to be more honest." "I was afraid of that day," Adrienne admitted. "Afraid they'd hate me if they knew the truth." "We all make mistakes," Griffin said calmly. "But what matters is how we learn from them and how we get better. You're a good mother, Adrienne. The kids know this." After the call, Griffin sat on his balcony, looking at the stars and reflecting on his journey over the past year or so. On the face of it, he lost everything. His marriage, his brother, the children he thought were his. But in a way, he also gained a new perspective, a new purpose. He learns that true fatherhood transcends blood and that true love can survive the darkest moments. He knows the road ahead is still full of challenges. The twins will continue to seek answers about their identity and family history. Adrienne is still trying to deal with her guilt and grief. Griffin himself is still trying to come to terms with his brother's betrayal and death. But in the midst of disaster, there is hope. In the midst of this storm, they built a new kind of family, based not on perfection, but on mutual respect, honesty, and a shared love for their children. Above all, Griffin wants this story to serve as a cautionary tale. The terrible cost of betrayal affects not only those directly involved, but many innocent people as well. Maybe someone will learn from their mistakes and choose a brighter path. The next morning, when the twins dragged him to the park, Griffin saw the innocence and trust in their eyes. Despite all that they have been through, they still have the ability to love without reservation and trust unconditionally. It strengthened his resolve to protect that innocence no matter what it took, to make sure their future wasn't defined by the shadows of the past. As he watched them run in the sunlight, Griffin knew that despite the bruises, they would be fine. They'll all be fine. That's the end of today's story. For more captivating tales, hit subscribe and never miss an episode.